Hello again! I'm back today to discuss the justly hated trope of fridging and how RWBY avoids, subverts and deconstructs it. Thanks as always to my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible. Links below. So first, what is fridging? Fridging comes from Women in Refrigerators, which was coined in response to Green Lantern Volume 3, 54, 1994, written by Ron Marz, in which Alexandra DeWitt, all-around cool lady and girlfriend of protagonist Kyle Rayner, is killed by the villain Major Force and stuffed in a refrigerator. This was done specifically to enrage Kyle rather than because of anything Alexandra had done on her own within the story. Another earlier famous example of fridging would be the death of Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man 121. Gwen is thrown to her death by Green Goblin, and physics briefly decides to work as it does in RWBY, leading to her neck to snap when Spider-Man catches her with his web. As with Alexandra, Gwen was killed solely for Peter's pain, which has generally defined fridging for much of its existence, i.e. a woman is killed in order to elicit anger and grief in a male character while herself having little inner life or agency. In essence, it's the most intense form of objectification, a living person rendered into a lifeless tool solely to evoke a reaction from someone else. The definition of the trope has been somewhat expanded to include any character killed so carelessly, but it's primarily still utilised around women. It's a well-hated trope, and for good reason, but like with, say, damsel in distress, it can be misapplied. OSP has great videos on both topics, but in the case of damsel in distress, they note that in their eyes, for anyone to qualify as a damsel in distress, they need to meet a lot of criteria ranging from having no personality, having no agency in the story, and having no inspection on their personality or circumstances when captured. Put simply, it only qualifies as a damsel in distress if the character could be replaced with a shiny object and keep the story largely the same. A similar criteria can apply to fridging to determine whether they were a character that died or a character that was killed off solely for a cheap emotional reaction. Did the character have any agency or an active role in the story? Did the character die for reasons other than to evoke a reaction in another character? Did the character's death have an actual dramatic and narrative weight outside of this initial visceral moment? That last one applies to both characters and the audience. If the answer to these is yes, then it's not fridging, it's merely a character death. If the character lacked these or loses these through their death, then it becomes fridging. This trope can also be broadened to apply to non-deaths. The Women in Refrigerators website by comic book writer Gail Simon, created in March 1999, lists superheroines who have been either depowered, assaulted, or cut up and stuck in refrigerators in an effort to illustrate that female superheroes are disproportionately likely to be brutalized in comic books, usually to further character arcs of male superheroes. So, we have established what fridging is and how it works, so why do some people erroneously apply it to RWBY? Well, some folks are likely just misguided. It's like how in a show dominated by entirely queer characters, some may die, and how this is different to the bury your gays trope engaged in by, say, The 100, which had very few gay people and killed off half its flagship gay pairing the moment it became canon. I.e., in regards to RWBY, there's a ton of plot-centric and important women, which means some are going to die, and someone may then misapply fridging based on merely thinking it means a woman dies in media. This video is for those people. I will now go through a list of pseudo-fridgings people have complained about and breaking down why this trope does not apply. Off the cuff, I'm going to cover figures like Amber, Tok, Gretchen Reinhardt, Summer, assuming she's dead, and Anne Wren as one group. This is because these characters all exist as backstory rather than characters within the story as it stands. In essence, they exist in the same way Salem's dad, Bruce Wayne's parent, and Krypton do. They exist to give context to the main character, not act as actual agents within the story itself. Next up is another fish in a barrel, Freya. Off the cuff, her life on screen, while brief, was given a lot of weight and depth. Her death was given a great deal of dignity, and she had clear agency in her final moments, and while her death did further the story, she was not killed to evoke an emotional reaction in someone else. She is an example of a minor role, big impact, and a sort of transitionary character by her nature. Think Kami from Dragon Ball if you need a lighter example. Moving on, let's touch on Alex, a child who was lost in the ever after with her brother and the star of a book based on her time there, only the book was misrepresentative of the situation as her brother was there and she was not having a good time to say the least. Jean, lost in the same location and displaced in time, tried to lead her down the path of the books, failing to realise that some scraggly stranger knowing way more than he should about a child and trying to control her every action would only foster paranoia and fear. A fact that led her to poison him and make her for an escape with her brother, only to begin reflecting on her actions throughout the ever after and deciding to fix what she'd broken before going home, only to be killed by the curious cat in a rage at this perceived betrayal. So off the cuff, Alex was not killed with the intention of impacting Jean, and more to the point, no one even knew Alex was dead until the end of volume 9, and after it was revealed, it was given a resolution. One that did benefit Jaune, but also thematically tied into her own desires to fix the things she had broken. Adding to that, like the first group, Alex is not strictly speaking a character so much as she is backstory, much the same as her brother. They exist to flesh out the setting and cast, but they are not in of themselves agents within the story. Next up, Vernal. Now on its surface this might look a bit like Fridging, given she was a literal body double in universe and both lived and died for Raven's continued existence. However, she was not killed to evoke a reaction in Raven. She did have agency in her life and death, however screwed her circumstances, and the narrative is well aware of the tragedy of her existence as a body double and what it says about Raven as a character that she used someone like this. While she did have a small death in many ways, she was also a minor character, so it was reflective of her position in the overall story rather than a disregard of her character in general. Next up, we have one that even I complained about, as you can see if you go back to my V5 review on Tumblr and various forums. Namely, Weiss being run through the spear by Cinder. She survives of course, but it did rankle myself and many others. But upon reflection, while I think the effort was a bit clumsy, I think it may have actually been an attempt to deconstruct Fridging. Hear me out. Our heroes are ambushed at Haven Academy by the villains. Senior Huntsman Crow is trying to keep them all together, but Jaune's temper gets the better of him and he charges Cinder for revenge. It becomes clear in the fight that he's basically just an angry kid with a death wish, and when he affirms he's fine with dying if it means even inconveniencing Cinder, she decides to punish him for that attitude. Namely, she hurls a spear through an already injured Weiss. This act brings out Jaune's semblance and thus develops his character and was done specifically to get to him. However, the semblance Jaune develops is a support one. Rather than being angry, he's scared and guilty and ends up helping heal Weiss with his new power. Weiss herself does not die, but instead is healed and comes back swinging, getting a badass return to the battle by skewering Salem's strongest fighter. Meanwhile, Jaune is left exhausted on the ground, his anger only serving to enable the villains, while developing a more passive ability helped his allies. What's more, while Cinder did this to mess with Jaune, she doesn't actually have any personal beef with him so much as she was just annoyed at him in that moment and decided to be cruel. In this regard, compared to Frieza taking out Dende, it's a cruel display done to show villainy, but it's not really about trying to force some kind of growth or change in attitude, it's just being a dick. In essence, I think this was an effort to deconstruct Fridging that didn't quite work. Even with this context, it still doesn't jive with me, but I can appreciate the spirit of it. We're racing to the end zone with our 3 finalists, Sienna Khan, Penny Polendina, and Pyrrha Nikos. Firstly, we have Sienna, the hero Queen Khan. We have another plot point I viscerally objected to and critiqued, and still do. Please bring her back, RT. But while she did die in a rather unpleasant way, it was not exploitative like being stuffed in a fridge would be. It was not done to further the angst or rage of any other character, but to further Adam's geopolitical machination. Sienna herself, while only appearing for a short time, had a lot of meta weight thanks to her role in changing the White Fang, and she had personality to spare. So while it was certainly a waste of a character and one that damaged the rather fraught Fauna/White Fang storyline, it was not Fridging. Now we reach Penny, a much beloved member of the cast by the fandom and a character tragically killed by Jaune to ensure that her magic did not get stolen by Cinder after taking a fatal injury. Many have issue with this death, and it certainly is a contentious topic in fandom to this day, but I do not believe it was Fridging. For while Jaune was impacted by her death, she wasn't injured to get to him, and Penny's character was much broader than her impact on just Jaune. Her death has left an impact that's felt by more than any one character, and it's an impact that's present well after she's gone, and she's granted a great deal of dignity and weight by the cast, especially RWBY. She was essentially another one of the protagonists throughout volumes 7 and 8. This was a major character death, and it's treated as such. What's more, the circumstances surrounding her death were tied to the loss of her mechanical body, exchanged for one seemingly born of her soul to escape what was functionally a deadly disease. Penny had little time to get used to this body or recover from the experience before Cinder's attack, and decided, rather than evacuating, to fling herself into battle even as she struggled to fight with this new body. Penny's first and second deaths were tragedies that tied back to Atlas's dehumanization that left her with a tendency to not value her own life even when it was clear that she was worthwhile, as well as fighting for agency in-universe against so many forces seeking to control her for their own reasons. If you want a comparison for Penny's narrative weight and tragedy, think Boromir or May Hughes and you have Penny Polendina. Not identical, but very similar. Finally, we have Pyrrha Nikos. Some people frame her death as being solely for Jaune's character, but in reality he was only one of many characters who were negatively impacted, with her death being more about exposing the hypocrisy and horrible nature of Ozpin's martyrdom-based ideal, RWBY unlocking her silver eyes, and importantly, Pyrrha's own mental breakdown due to outside stresses and her own inability to come to terms with her self-sacrificing tendencies and hero complex. While Pyrrha did satellite Jaune too much for my taste in volumes 1 and 2,
and Pyrrha. Hello again.
She very much came to her own in Volume 3 and was a major player. What's more, even before that, she certainly had her moments in the sun without him, such as defeating Cardinal or leading Juniper during the Breach. We could also touch on her mythological inspirations, but even if we ignore that Pyrrha was based on Achilles and thus her tragic death has made her weight, the fact is, she was the brightest of her generation, the star pupil, the false hero / maiden within the narrative. Her death was the final turning point on happy school adventures and heralded the shift into the main story arc. Adding to that, while Jean did get some focus around her death, Pyrrha's death was built entirely on her own tragic agency and heroism. Adding to that, Pyrrha was not just Jean's nominal love interest, but his teacher and mentor whose lessons he still uses in the next volumes to guide his training. Pyrrha was in essence the mentor who died heroically holding off a major villain. Think Obi-Wan Kenobi. Wow, no wonder she was so popular. Everyone loves Obi-Wan Kenobi. So there you have it, a complete breakdown on every main series death, its thematic and narrative role, and why it was definitely not fridging. Thanks to my editor Enigma for helping expand on this script and editing, and thanks to you all for stopping by. If you'd like to help support my work, please swing by my Patreon. If you'd like to commission 3D models, please hit up my Ko-fi. Thanks for tuning in.